Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Kevin Keneally. I am the program director for the University Career Center at the College of Information, and you are all here today for the Jumpstart Your Job Search workshop. Um, just want to name, we are gonna try to save plenty of time for questions at the end, but also throughout, like as we go through sections, we'll leave time for questions. And really at any point, if any questions are coming up, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll definitely make sure to get to them. Great. So can get started. And we always like to get started with just naming the vision of the University Career Center, and that is to empower all University of Maryland students to realize their full career potential, right? So no matter where you're at, I know today, right, is for master's students, but no matter where you're at in your journey at UMD, we're here to support you. So great. Before we get into the content, just wanted to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. Again, my name is Kevin Keneally, he, him pronouns. I'm the program director for the University Career Center at the College of Information. And maybe we can go top to bottom. So I'll pass it off to Kate.
Hi, everyone. Kate Jewell, Senior Program Director, working with the University Career Center at RU. Happy to meet you today. And I'll kick it over to Caroline.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Bodner, she, her pronouns. I'm a career advisor at the University Career Center at RU, and I will kick it to Becca.
Hi, everybody. My name is Becca Ryan, she, her pronouns. I'm the program director for computer math and natural science students.
Hi everyone, my name is Piper Holly. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm a career advisor with the UCC at CMNS.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So you'll hear from everyone here today. Um, and what we will cover today is, so I'll get started talking a little bit about our current context and an overview of the current job market. Then we're going to really focus on kind of what can you do in light of the current job market. So we're going to talk about general job search strategies and tools, networking strategies and tools, resume and cover letter writing, additional resources, and then just right transitioning to your next step. So, um, yeah, right. Like I said, we're gonna kind of ground us in the context of the current job market. I think, right, all of you, I'm sure, are currently job searching. That's why you're here. So I think you probably all have at least some awareness of what the job market is looking like right now. But I want to go through some data, just to share kind of what that's looking like. So the first thing I want to share comes from the Handshake Class of 2025 Network Trends Report. And this is a chart that's showing what job availability has looked like over time between February 2020 and June 2024. So the black line you see represents Handshake full-time job postings, and then the red line is JOLTS job openings, which JOLTS is through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And basically, can see that these kind of are aligned. Basically, what I want to point out here is, right, obviously, when COVID hit, there was a pretty sharp dip in job availability, but then that over, a couple of years as vaccines came out and kind of people were returning to work a lot, um, we saw a really big growth in job availability. But then over the past couple of years, that has actually dipped a little bit, not to the point, of right when COVID hit, but has dipped versus a couple of years ago. And that aligns with what I'm kind of going to show you here. And so this is data from the Job Outlook spring update from this year from a organization, a professional association called the National Association of Colleges and Employers. Really, what you need to know for this essentially is that um, the NACE, or National Association of Colleges and Employers, they will, on a yearly or biannually basis, they will survey recruiters at a variety of employers across the country, different industries, and they will really ask about, right, their hiring practices, what their trends are, what they project their hiring will look like for this next year. And really here, right, what you're seeing, especially like since 2022, right, is these percentages are in relation to the previous year, right? So, in 2022, in the fall, they were projecting that they were going to hire 26% more people than they did the previous year, right? Um, and so that's what that's looking like. So you can basically see, right, that this kind of aligns with that last chart I showed you where 2023, 24, 25 is kind of leveling off, tailing off a little bit from that peak of 2022. Um, but right, as you see this year, people are not mostly projecting that they're gonna hire less than they did last year. So it's looking pretty similar to what it looked like last year. We don't need to go through all of this. This is just high level. Just wanted to point out, right, that this looks different depending on the industry you're looking at. Right. If you kind of put all of these together, it's pretty, pretty flat and consistent with the previous year. But, right, you see some like wholesale trade and management consulting that are, right, anticipating they're going to be hiring a lot more people than they did last year versus, right, computer and electronics manufacturing and motor vehicle manufacturing. They're a lot lower. But, right, for the most part, people are kind of, in that middle zone. Similarly, right, this is kind of another way to look at some of this data, right, is, the NACE survey also asks employers, are they going to increase their hires, maintain their hires, or decrease their hires, right? So what I want to point out here, right, is that 64.6% number of maintaining, right? So the vast majority are projecting that they're going to continue to maintain the same level of hiring or, right, almost 25% increasing also, right? So 89% are either increasing or keeping it the same, whereas only 10.9% are saying they're decreasing. One thing I'll name here, right, is you see the number of respondents for the spring is a lot lower than the fall. A large part of that is probably because there are a number of federal agencies that may not be represented here because they chose not to respond in light of, all of the cuts that have been happening at the federal level, which we'll talk about more in a second. And then the last thing here, right, before we kind of talk about some of the local impacts, especially with the federal government, is again just representing that last slide by industry. And again, really what I want to highlight here is that aside from the exception of a few, right, you're mostly seeing that people are either maintaining or increasing hires. And yes, as Becca said, we'll be making sure to send out slides. So all of what you see here, including all of the like links and things that you'll see later, are going to be available. So don't worry about making sure that you have to like capture all of that right now. Great. So I know I mentioned I want to talk a little bit about what this looks like in our local context, right? So we're going to take a look at a brief video, probably about a minute and a half or so from NBC4 Washington, a local news network. If some of you aren't familiar, that they ran a piece recently on the status of the job market in the DC area. So we'll take a look at this. And we tested this before, so audio should work. If there's any issues or anything, please feel free to put that in the chat. So actually, did it? I'm wondering, is this the same?
The Trump administration has upended federal agencies, leaving many federal workers without a job. NBC4 spoke to an economist at Indeed, one of the largest job search websites, who took a closer look at the local job market. They said that they've seen an uptick in applications, but the number of postings showing open jobs here in the DMV is way down compared to the rest of the country. In the DMV, knowledge workers make up 92% of the federal workforce. And now that many of them are out of a job, they're about to hit another obstacle.
But a lot of those knowledge work type sectors, which are very prevalent in the DC area, have been struggling for some time.
As of February 28th, overall job postings in the U.S. are up 11% compared to February 1st, 2020. But in the DMV, that number is negative 13.8%.
It's already competitive before layoffs happened. So, we're trying to reabsorb people into the private economy, the private market, where it's already a pretty tight labor market before we added to it through federal layoffs.
But despite the competitive market, some laid off federal workers might have an easier time looking for work than others. According to Indeed, there are some sectors of employment doing better than others, such as legal services, accounting, healthcare, and warehousing, giving federal workers with experience in those fields a leg up.
But if you're looking for something in banking, finance, software development, IT tech, it's going to take a lot longer than it would a few years ago to find a new job.
All right, so we're gonna cut it off there. And I'd love to hear like if anyone has any reactions to that, any questions, thoughts, like please feel free to put them in the chat. Um, but what I do want to say is right, like I know that is bleak, right? It doesn't probably feel great to see that, but it's also probably a reality that a lot of you are aware of, right? And I think the point that she made at the very end, right, of that segment before I cut it off, right, that it's just going to take a little bit longer than it has in years past, right, to maybe find that job. I think that's right, an important reality to name. Again, right, I realize that's probably not what you want to hear, but I think it's important that we kind of name that. Um, so the last thing I'll touch on here, right, is just kind of rounding out that thought, right? So what you saw there is, yes, maybe countrywide, and that data I showed you earlier is nationwide, right? Um, nationwide, we're not maybe seeing a huge change in the amount of jobs that are available, but there is a dip in that in the DMV specifically, and nationwide, there's a huge spike in the number of job seekers. So I just wanted to provide some data with that. So this chart is actually from CNN recently, and they did a little digging into what layoffs in the federal government looks like between January and March of this year. They found that at least 121,000 federal jobs were cut or will be cut. Well, also then, right, some industry data showed that it's actually far more than that and potentially up to 280,000, right? So this is a huge, huge amount, right? This is very significant, and nothing that we've seen, right, any time in our recent history. And so, um, this is again nationwide, right? So not all of those people are in the DMV, but right, a very high percentage of them are in the DMV, right? So all of those people are going to be re-entering and maybe already have re-entered the job market, right? And then just to give some Maryland specific data too. So, right, like I said, DC does have the highest concentration of folks in the federal government, but Maryland has the second highest, right? So 4.5% of Maryland's workforce is in the federal government. And that is about 269,000 people, right? And it's projected that about 29,000 of those will or have or will lose their jobs, which is almost 11% of that 269,000 number, right? So a huge amount of people looking for jobs there, right? And this aligns with some of the handshake data that's available too, which shows, right, that handshake postings have declined 15% over the past year, while number of applications per job have increased by 30%. Right. So again, I know it's not great to see this, right? But I think it's really important to name also that struggling with your job search right now is almost definitely not just on you, right? There's a lot of competition out there, and it's looking a lot different than it has recently, right? So it's overall just going to take a little bit more time and more resilience and persistence. And right, hopefully today we're able to give you some good ideas and tools to help you navigate that. And then also, right, like we at the Career Center are also just here for you after you graduate too. We meet with folks up to 1 year after they graduate. So yeah, just want to say, right, it's not all on you right now, and just stick with it as hard as it might be. So with that, right, those were all things you can't control. So I was wondering if you all wanted to put some ideas in the chat of what you think you can control. And I'll give you a second to do that. And it can be super simple. Yeah, networking. Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that we're definitely going to be talking about. Caroline's going to cover that. Strength of resume and cover letter. Absolutely. And we're also going to be talking about that too. Kate will cover that a bit later. Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, and right, we'll cover a few other things that are under your control as well. And with that, I will pass it off to my colleague Becca.
All right. So, in this next section, we are going to talk about some of the different things that you all have already identified in terms of things that you can control. But I think, to get started, Kevin shared a lot of really great information with us. So we are going to be talking through some strategies and tools that will help you be a bit more intentional in identifying industries that are hiring and finding those opportunities. And we'll move forward into kind of thinking about what that mindset should be with these tools first. So to get started, it's really important that you think about exploring diverse opportunities right now. We're seeing, especially, in the DMV area, there are challenges that we may be facing with certain types of industries. For example, a federal government role may be a little bit more difficult to come by at this point. But we are still seeing that opportunities do exist. And I think part of what's most important right now is being able to keep an open mind as you consider how the degree you're earning right now may lend itself toward different types of opportunities. So, you may have had an idea of one specific job title that you were really excited about, but your degree is likely applicable to lots of different opportunities. And it's often that folks will switch throughout their careers. So we want to think about what are some unique skills that you possess that might help you with lots of different opportunities, and how can you make sure that you're not just applying to one job title, thinking about applying to lots of different ones, considering employers that maybe align with your skill set, even if it wasn't your dream employer. For example, if you're studying meteorology, you might not realize, but the construction industry often needs meteorologists. So may not be an obvious connection, as obvious as NOAA, but it still is an area where you may be able to find a job. And so you want to really look at that data that Kevin provided and start to think creatively about how you might be able to work in lots of different contexts to gain some experience while you kind of work through this market and as we see it, play out a little bit more here. So we do have quite a few specific resources that will help you with figuring out how your skills and your degree might be more widely applicable. One of my favorites, just to get started, is a career assessment. So within Handshake, we have two different career assessments that you can access as a student. They're called Focus 2 and Pathway U. Both go beyond your basic assessment that you might have taken in high school. They actually combine your academic interests, your work experiences, your personal passions and values, and then will help recommend roles that you might be a strong fit for based on all of the different answers that you provide in those areas. And again, you want to look at these results with an open mind. So think about, what are some opportunities that I might not have thought about before that could still align really well with my interests in this tough market. Another one of my personal favorites is, what can I do with this major? This is a really good starting point if you're trying to figure out how your degree might be applicable across a variety of different industries. So you can actually go in through Handshake with this one as well, and see what types of industries typically highlight someone with your expertise. And it'll also highlight what sorts of skills you probably developed as you went through your major. We do have a graduation survey report. It tracks our trends for recent undergraduates, but we are, definitely capturing those undergrad trends that could still be valuable to a master's student. So, for example, if you're studying biology, you may still find some of the employers that our undergrads are going for relevant to a graduate level experience as well. And I'm going to show you on the next slide where to actually find all of these on Handshake so that you can make sure that you do those. Um, Two other ones I really love are the Vault Guides and ONET. So both of these are going to help you learn about different types of opportunities and in particular, learn about different industries you're less familiar with. So for example, we'll use that construction again. If you thought you were going to be a meteorologist, but now you're going into construction, construction might be an unknown industry for you, right? It might not be something you thought about before. And so being able to learn about what are the key terms of the construction industry is also really helpful. So the Vault Guide will help you do that. It basically breaks down different industries, gives you the vocabulary, the basic information that you need to know to feel confident as a job seeker. And then ONET is also going to give you some projections and different trends like that at the national level of what we're seeing in terms of projected job growth. Finally, if you're an international student or you're interested in working abroad, definitely check out Going Global on Handshake. This page has a job board with country-specific guides. It has a list of U.S. organizations that have applied to sponsor employees in the past to help you learn which employers might be most friendly to sponsorship. And it's a really great tool if you're thinking about how could I maybe go to different regions of the world and do this type of work with my degree. So on the next slide, we'll show you, if you log into Handshake, you probably all have hopefully logged into Handshake by now, and then you click that Career Center tab, you'll see a link to resources. And from that resource page, you'll actually be able to see like 10 different resources, quite a few there, some that I haven't even talked about. But those are where you'll find most of what we've shared today so far, so that you can really dive in and do that assessment and check out those guides. All right, and I'm going to pass it off to Piper.
Okay, so now that we've talked about how to really do that exploration and figure out what maybe some career paths or specific roles that you may be interested in, now we're going to move into what are ways to actually search for jobs. So on the right-hand side, you'll see some different job sites. Handshake is one that we use through the University of Maryland. If you are someone who has maybe less work experience, you're trying to get into a role that may be more entry level, Handshake may be a great place to start. Google also has a really great search feature that allows you to add alerts. So similar to like if you've used Google Flights before, where you enter the parameters that you're looking for and it will notify you every day or like every week, you can also do that with jobs as well. So you can put like the location, the types of roles that you're interested in, and then anything that relates to that, it will notify you. LinkedIn is also growing as not only like a networking site, but as a job board as well. So there's a lot of roles listed on there. Indeed, as we mentioned before, is a great platform that you're probably familiar with already. And USA Jobs is the platform that the federal government uploads jobs to. As we mentioned before, that's quickly, changing. It's going up and down, and we don't want to scare you and say, not to look there, but it's constantly changing. So it might just be a job board that you want to monitor over the next few months because you never know what opportunities may arise. So as far as what are you actually searching for when you're on these platforms, so you may want to search for jobs relating to your program or your major, your intended job title. Maybe you search on ONET, right? And you see different job titles that you're interested in. So you may want to put that in the search bar. You can also use filters on these sites as well. So you can filter by the location. Maybe you want to work 30 miles from Washington, D.C., something like that. It will also let you filter in person versus remote roles, part-time versus full-time. I would just caution you to not filter too much because it's really based on what the person put in when they were entering the job on the platform. So you don't want to kind of narrow your search too much just because somebody didn't enter this one type of information on the job when they were uploading it. So I would say stay basic, maybe just like location and person, that type of thing. Um, you also want to make sure you're setting up job alerts, as I said before, and then you can also research the companies that you find. So some platforms such as Handshake, right, it will allow you to click on the company and you can kind of get a little information about maybe what they do. And you can click on their website. There's also websites like Glassdoor that allow you to gain more information. Just be cautious again of the information that you're seeing on some of these websites because it's really just what people put on. So, right, reviews can be good or bad. You just want to take everything with a grain of salt. And then also you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the date that the job was posted, which I will show in like a couple seconds. Just because a lot of the time these jobs can be posted on these sites, but they're not always going back to take the job down. So I would say probably something within the last month or two is what you want to pay more attention to, something that's maybe posted 6 months ago. If it's a job that you're really interested in, you may want to reach out to them, ask if it's still available, if you can see like contact or email, some way to contact them. But other than that, I would say you probably want to pay more attention and put more energy to applying to roles that are newer. And always apply on the company's website when possible. So sometimes they just use these sites to advertise the opportunity, but they're not going as often to look on Handshake or Indeed to see who actually applied through that platform. So applying externally is usually the best way to get that direct path to the hiring committee and get to that next step. So what should you actually look for when you're on these sites? So this is a screenshot of what it looks like if you were on Handshake. As you can see, this is just one job posting, but there's a lot of information that you can get on here. And it kind of just changes based on what the person put up who was uploading the job. But essentially, you want to look for the job title, right? So you can search by job title. You just want to pay attention to what is interesting to you, what stands out to you. You also want to pay attention to the qualifications. So if you're newer to the job market or you haven't had much work experience, just to note that you don't have to kind of match up to every single thing that's in the qualifications, right? You want to just make sure that it's something that's in your realm. So if they're asking for a specific degree type, if they're asking for maybe you'd have experience with specific type of work, right? You want to say, okay, do overall are these things that relate to me? Do I have this experience? But maybe there's one thing that I'm not as familiar with. I would say it's still okay to apply for that, right? You just want to make sure that it's within your realm. You also want to pay attention to the roles and responsibilities that really shows you what you would be doing within this job. So maybe you want to make like a pros and cons list or you want to see like maybe you take a screenshot and you like highlight some of the things that you think are more relevant for you, right? But that just gives you an idea of what this role actually is. Other things to pay attention to are salary, location. As you can see, this job says it's full time, and that they're only looking for people with US work authorization. So those are some basic things that you want to keep pay attention to as well. And just to note that this says the role was posted 6 months ago, but the application date was April 28th. On the left-hand side, you'll see this accountant role was posted 10 months ago. So you just want to pay attention to things like that. And again, maybe if you were to click on the USDA, you might see like a contact information for someone and you can reach out and ask them if the role is still available. Also, a very important part of applying online is using the keywords in the roles and responsibilities or even qualifications sometimes and making sure that you are tailoring your resume. So we'll talk a little bit about this in some of the upcoming sections, but basically all this means is that sometimes your resume won't actually be looked at by a person in the initial screening. It will go through an applicant tracking system, and that tracking system is just looking for keywords that the person said that they're looking for in a candidate, right? So you just want to make sure that if there's certain experiences that you have that you find in the job posting, that you're incorporating those within that exact language within your resume so that you can get through that initial screening phase. So staying organized, right? So some people say that looking for a job is a job in and of itself. And if you're that person who sometimes like me who has 20 tabs open, right? We just want to make sure that you're staying organized and make things a little bit easier for you. So we actually have a copy of this tracking tool, this spreadsheet that you can copy for yourself. So this QR code will take you directly to make a copy, and then we'll send these slides out to you as well, so you could just click on the link and have it on your laptop as well. But this just allows you to keep track of all of the job postings that you're finding. A lot of the job boards do allow you to have like a favorites tab within the specific website, but this allows you to take everything from maybe all of the websites from Handshake and Indeed and LinkedIn to have all of them in one place, right? So you can add the organization that posted the job title, the direct link so you can go back to apply, contact information, application deadline, all of that information in one spot so that you can go back when you're actually applying to jobs. Um, it's important also to update your calendar system. So if you're someone who's, super reliant on Google Calendar, right, making sure you're putting these application dates in your calendar, that a lot of the times they can sneak up on you. Also, if there's any recruiting events, the Handshake events tab can be also a great place to find like recruiting events and information sessions. So you can put that in the spreadsheet or in your calendar as well. And it's also really important to just make realistic goals for yourself, right? So if you're someone, we're like a few weeks out from graduation, right? So maybe you're just saying, okay, I'm still working on my finals, so I can only dedicate 1 hour to finding jobs and maybe 1 hour to applying, right? And maybe that bumps up after graduation is over. You might have some more free time. Maybe that turns into 3 hours, right? So whatever that is for you, just think about what can work for you, what's realistic, and give yourself grace when you can't find that. But just some tips for helping you to stay organized and keep on top of your deadlines. One other really cool feature for Handshake is the collection. So it is a collection of tailored roles by industry that you can use. So again, you'll have these slides. So whatever relates to what you're interested in, you could just click on this and then it will show you a whole collection of jobs that relate to it. And then I'll throw it over for networking.
I also want to jump in quickly, maybe because Sarah asked, do you have a recommendation as to how many jobs you should apply to per week? I don't, and others can add into here, but I'd say I don't think there's a perfect amount necessarily, right? I think it's really about your capacity. Right? Like I would, you can go for as many as it feels like you have the capacity to do, right? Like some weeks that might be like I can apply to 15 jobs this week, but next week it might be I can do three, right? Um, Kind of depends on that capacity. I'd say overall too, I know, right, it's really competitive right now, like I talked about. I think, yes, the quantity is important, but I think like the quality versus quantity approach, right, is important to think about. Like, yes, you want to get some out there, but you want to make sure the ones that you send out are really tailored quality applications. Because a lot of people are just going to be sending out the same exact materials to tons of different positions, and then, it might not get picked up as much. So I don't know if others have anything else to add.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sarah, I see that you said the hardest part is tailoring of the resume. It's very time consuming. I would agree with that. But we really see that that is something that can make a big difference. And sometimes if you're applying to 5 jobs that you really like and you have a great tailored resume, that can give you a better yield in terms of hearing back than applying to 20 jobs that you just used a generic resume. So even though it might be more time consuming and you might not be able to put as much or as many applications out, it might overall end up being more beneficial than if you put out more.
Okay, we'll move on to networking then. So I thought it might be sort of informative and also a little different from our in-person version of this. If you could put in the chat an emoji that represents your feelings towards networking. And then we can just look at that as get ready for my slides here. They're still waiting for that super big smiley or thumbs up. No, this is actually what I expected. A lot of mixed feelings. It's not everyone's cup of tea. Different people have different levels of comfort with it or distaste about it. So I'm hoping after my slides, if I can reduce any anxiety or confusion by like 1%, that would be great. Because sometimes it is just changing your mindset, which will help you be more motivated and want to do it because as hopefully my slides show, it's fairly important part of this whole process. All right, so starting with the basics, what is networking? So starting with that reframing, I always like to reframe it as it's a conversation. Just to think of it simply as a conversation with someone where you want to learn something, probably about their profession, their industry, the process that their career path, their career journey, how they got to where they are. But yeah, at its basis, that's what it is. And so it becomes very important, especially if in challenging times, especially if you're in a very small field or a niche field, because many jobs are found through word of mouth. And as Becca pointed out to me as we were preparing for this presentation, through referrals. In certain fields, it's all about, being able to list someone's name on a cover letter or saying that you know someone who works there. So it's very important. And even over the last decade or more, when there's been a proliferation of job boards and it feels like there's thousands or tens of thousands of jobs listed on these job boards, it's still not all of the jobs. We know that. We know some are still not on the job boards ever, or for like a blip. And then you might miss it, blink and you'll miss it. Basically, they're only up there for a few days. But maybe if you had been networking and talking to people in that field, they might have known. Usually, they almost always they know there's going to be a job opening because they know someone has vacated a position, and there's obviously might need to be filled, but it takes a while to get it up and ready to be posted. But you could kind of have a heads up about it. So just a couple. I thought I'd share some personal examples. So before I came to work at the University of Maryland, my cousin worked here before me. And so through her, and like in the Career Center, so through her, I met a variety of the people who work here and who are in the committee that hires and ultimately led me here today. And then since this is a group of graduate master's level students, I thought I'd share also that I got my graduate degree from Towson University. I got a master's in counseling psychology. And even though I was only in a cohort that had 13 total people in it, so we went through year 1 and year 2 together, taking the same courses for those 2 years, and there was 13 of us, including myself, so 12 plus me. One of my classmates works here at Maryland in the graduate school. So it's a very small world is the point of all of this. And it just really brings home the idea that Networking is important, no matter what industry you're going into. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about possible contacts, because I think sometimes until you map it out, until you write it down, you might think you have fewer contacts than you do, or that the contact needs to be a certain type of contact. Like you might think it needs to be someone who's got some sort of power, like they are a hiring manager, they are a recruiter, they're in HR, but really it can be anyone. It could be a peer, it could be your classmate, as I mentioned. So yeah, I just wanted, to take a look at this. Maybe there's some additional ideas that I missed that you can think of. But I did want to say, if you are, I know there could be people here about to graduate, maybe some people still have another semester, I'm not sure. But if you plan on doing if your family is planning any type of graduation party or to come to a graduation ceremony, you might be interacting with some family members, aunts, uncles, cousins that you don't see all the time or don't, keep in touch with every week, that suddenly now you are. It's a really great time to talk to them, see if they have any leads, tell them about what you're hoping to find, give examples of job titles or job descriptions that they could be another set of eyes for you to look for, because you're only one person. And as we talked about with that Excel sheet that Piper was talking about, like you only have so many hours in the week, or no, Kevin was talking to, like on average, like you have different weeks where you have more time, less time. So maybe you can enlist someone, a retired family member, someone who has more time on their hands to help out. So I think that's a good tip. But I also want to say a little bit more about the peer-to-peer, because at the very least you have classmates, even if you're thinking, well, I'm not very close with my professors, or I haven't I haven't met other people, yet while I'm here. So I want to talk about something that I did back when I started my career advising career. It was a tough time to start this kind of career because it was the recession of 2008, 2009. And that was, another really tough job market that I had to help my clients, my students navigate. And so one thing I did back then was this idea of a job club or support group where seniors, I was working with mostly undergraduates, there might have been some graduate students that came, would meet weekly in person and do all the things that I have on this slide. I won't read it word for word, but sharing their experience, sharing advice, just being emotional support, because sometimes you just want to vent and be like you don't want to vent to the recruiter or the employer. That's the time to put on your smiling face. But like to have a peer to just be like, this is much more challenging than I expected. But moving fast forward to 2025, not 2009, we could do this virtually on Zoom. There could be group chats, right, on WhatsApp or other, you name it, Discord or whatever people are using these days. It doesn't have to be the way we set it up back then, but that was what we were limited with our technology back then. But yeah, just an idea that this could be very helpful, because sometimes someone has a lead, they can't really use it for themselves. It's not their dream job, or it's not something that they're searching for, but it could very much help for you. Just something to think about. I also want to bring up the idea of professional associations. A lot of time undergrads are unfamiliar with this. I have a feeling that maybe by the time you're at the master's level, and maybe something that, at least for your own field, you've heard of. We've actually already talked about one when Kevin was talking about NACE, the National Association of College and Employers. That's a professional association for us in the career advising field. And so they exist in every industry. And so you can look on Google, look on Volt Guides to find yours. There's usually ones that are at the national level, the state level, the regional level, and sometimes even by identity groups. So many exist out there. Some even have their headquarters in our backyard here in DC, and you can actually get jobs with them, working for them, helping others in your industry. But if you don't want to work for them, you might want to join sooner you join, usually as a student or as a new professional and a new recent grad, is like the lowest fee you'll ever have to pay. Unless, of course, later, like your employer picks up the tab and pays for you to be a member. But a lot of times there's a sliding scale and there's a smaller fee if you're still a student because they know you might not could pay full price. But they host networking events, they host conferences, mentorship programs, which, is a much maybe more formal way to get to know people in your field. And they have discussion boards and listservs and their own job boards. So really just a lot of great resources and a way to stay active in your field after you leave school, because when you want to stay fresh with your knowledge and just up on trends and different things, that's really where you're probably going to go to be like your professional home for the foreseeable future. Continuing sort of with other ways to meet people in the DC area, you can also find a lot of these groups and more, like professional associations, but additional ones through like LinkedIn, things like that. Or you can find events on Eventbrite, and you can search even the other like non-professional networks like Facebook or et cetera, X, to find find groups. I'm members of one or two that are actually pretty active and useful, even on Facebook. That's not always meant to be for that thing, but that's where they exist. And one key tip I mentioned in a previous presentation that I just want to mention again is that when you're a member of these groups, you can often message the other members of the groups without being connected to them. So sometimes you might want to like message someone, and of course, sort of the traditional LinkedIn way is to send them a connection request and then wait for that request to be accepted. And then it sort of opens up the channel to speak with them. Oh, thank you, Sarah. But while you're waiting for that to happen, because not everyone checks their LinkedIn regularly like I do, or people in my field do. Or even maybe like you've exhausted your quota of invitations for the month. It happens to me all the time. If you go on someone's profile, it usually tells you towards the top of the page what groups you share with them. And if you join the most common groups, like the University of Maryland Alumni Association, or the group for your college, like mine would be RHU, or your major, those are likely you're going to match the people who were in your field. You probably have joined those same groups. And so then you go to the group, type in their name, they show up, and it says message. So like no barrier, no wall, no just pass go, just go right ahead and message them. So it's a great tip. And again, groups have discussion boards. People might, thank everyone for putting all these links in while I'm talking. I've seen them pop up and I'm not having a chance to read each message yet. But yeah, it's just really good idea. So moving on. Just some tips for establishing those connections. It's good to practice your elevator pitch before reaching out. We have a slide about that next. Figure out the best way to meet. Make sure it's a platform you're comfortable with. I just learned something about Zoom today, so we're always learning. Have a plan to set up additional conversations, so it's not just transactional. Always thank them for the meeting. That can go a long way. I know many recruiters, especially, still even really appreciate just even like a old-fashioned card if you're meeting them in person, but an email is fine as well. That's the most efficient way to do it. But yeah, just some tips. Keep, small things go far. Okay, so this is the idea of your commercial, your elevator pitch. It's basically just a couple quick facts about you. I do recommend ending with a question, because then it leads to a conversation versus just like an awkward pause where the person then has to wonder what they should say next. So you're kind of engaging them. But the more you practice, the more natural it will sound. So first you might just write something out that sounds a little robotic or scripted, but then you practice it, and next thing you know, it has your own voice, your own flair to it, and you'll have it at the ready whenever, because you never know when opportunity might strike. Okay, I do see this one coming up. What ending questions would you recommend? Like, for example, maybe you've just listed off some of your skills and maybe you say like, are these the type of skills, that you would be seeking, or like, or what kind of role and what kind of roles do you have in your organization that match, my skill sets? Could be something. It kind of depends on what you say right before it, but just something then that they would then have a response to. And again, we can, if other people, yeah, thanks, McKenna. If other people have ideas, we can continue that in the question section after my part here is done. So I just quickly want to go over informational interviews. I am trying to keep an eye on our time here and make sure Kate gets all her time too. So informational interview questions. So that's essentially kind of what you're doing. So the networking leads to this conversation, which is called an informational interview, because you're not really interviewing for the job yet. You're just getting some information. And there's all kinds of questions in the internet or chat GPT or anything can give you generate a whole brainstorming list of them. These were a few. I would just recommend that you think of ones that are most important and relevant to you and ask those. It doesn't have to be like these exact ones. Try to make them open-ended, not just yes, no. And some ones I also like to kind of end the informational interview on would be asking if the individual can warmly connect you to one or two others in their organization or within their network, because that's sort of taking that load off of you a little bit. And if it comes from this person, they're more likely to want to do that favor, or then you trying to start from square one again, like going back to the beginning, because maybe it takes a couple tries before you get someone who agrees to the informational interview. Maybe you get a couple no responses in there, but so now you've got someone, and so now ask them, who should I speak to next within your organization? So then hopefully that keeps the ball rolling a little bit. And then the second thing I like to kind of throw in there is ask them if it would be okay to follow up with them again in a certain time interval. So maybe you're like, if I'm still job searching in a month, if I'm at the end of the semester, because probably you might want to get back in touch, but you might be thinking to yourself, oh, I've already bothered them once and they're busy, professional. I don't want to kind of get on their nerves. But if they give you the green light and say, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to stay in touch, or it's fine if you reach out again, then you sort of, kind of have that clear conscience that you can do that. And just so you know that we also have an informational interview module in Elm. So any of our courses, I think Kate's going to talk about one of them too, possibly. They're just like free, asynchronous, no credit, no anything, just do them to get the information. There's lots of embedded videos and things like that make them very useful. Now we've come to the tools of the trade of networking. And so LinkedIn is sort of the top one that most everyone around the world uses. They have so many users for LinkedIn. So the tool within the tool that we most like to tell people about is the alumni sorting tool. So you're just going to pull up our school or any school, like where you went to undergrad if it wasn't here. And because I think every school's got a page. Look at their alumni. It's going to look something like this screenshot here. You can sort them by, their current employer, their industry, what they studied. Once you've done that, it's going to just really ease the process of you being able to look at their profile, see who you want to connect to, or even before even the connection point, right? Just even seeing trends or seeing where do other people with my skill sets or my major, where do they work? So just a lot of great things. And it's probably most likely that this is the most up-to-date place to get this information, because it's in the self-interest of each individual to keep their own LinkedIn as up-to-date as it could possibly be. So hopefully you're not getting, like old information when you're going through LinkedIn. And a little promo here for Terrapins Connect, which is the UMD version, I guess, of LinkedIn. It's a little bit more of a mentoring platform. There's a smaller amount of members overall, but they're very motivated and committed group. And there's some features in Terrapins Connect that LinkedIn doesn't have. I will say also you can import all your information from LinkedIn to TC, so that makes that a little bit easier. But it has some neat features, like it gives you some more customizable templates when you're reaching out to someone. We always recommend that you personalize those outreach messages. And it tells you some stats on the different members as far as their rate of response. And I'm trying to think what else, the rate of response, like, I don't know, it'll say things like, a percentage that they respond to people or how quickly, like within 24 hours. So hopefully you're getting, again, some better info of who you should try to reach out to. And then where the UCC is really excited about this new photo booth that they have acquired. So we want to let you know it's brand new, and it's a great way to get a good photo for your LinkedIn or your Terrapins Connect. So there's a process, as you can see, on how to get it done, but it's got good lighting. It's going to email it to you immediately. And I think you can like take a couple different poses and then pick the one that turned out the best. So it's just a really great tool. It's called the Iris Photo Booth. So it's lives in the Career Center, and we encourage you to follow the directions on here to get your photo. And I have one last slide, and that's just to say that the Career Center has a YouTube channel where there's a library of videos of past webinars or sessions like this. So if you ever miss one live, go there to see, if it's been uploaded. And this one today will be uploaded there by close of business today, as long as, nothing happens wrong with that. And that is all my slides. So let me open up for questions. And I see there's a lot in the chat, and I'm not sure how many other people have responded to, if there's any that are outlined still.
Caroline, I think we covered most of the ones that have been posted so far.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you guys for helping out there. So I'm gonna let Kate take over now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So we are going to talk now about resumes. I know there have been a couple questions that have come up along the way. In terms of resumes, why do you have to write a resume? It's basically, again, a chance to introduce yourself to the employer, kind of the basic facts, not just about you, but why you're great for that specific job. So we've talked a little bit about the importance of tailoring, and I'll have some tips on the next couple slides about how you can hopefully do that in a less time-intensive way. It can be helpful to have a master resume where you're kind of keeping track of everything you've done, and then you can kind of copy paste into different versions of your resume, especially if you're maybe targeting a couple of different industries or fields. But really, it is your kind of first chance to make a great impression on the employer. It is important to have a good resume and a good cover letter as well. So, in terms of some samples here, I put a sample 2-page resume on the screen here. I know we could have a mix of different master's, graduate programs here and industries you're interested in. There'll be another link on another slide to even more samples. But for most of you, 1 to 2 pages is probably going to be what we recommend. Again, you can always meet with us individually and talk about your specific industry and background and see the pages we would recommend. But in general, 1 to 2 pages. Sometimes some positions might ask for more of a CV, and the link on the screen here will take you to more of a CV example. But what I have up here would be more of a resume for industry, non-CV example. I'm not going to spend too long going through the specific sections because I imagine at this point, most of you have a resume, and I want to talk more about how you can probably make some of it even stronger, right? So the number one way that I find that most students can enhance their resume is through really looking at the bullet points, at the descriptions of what they've accomplished on their resume. 9 times out of 10, there's some bullet points on there that are more descriptions of what you did rather than more of what you accomplished. And so really think about the result or the impact of what you did at that position, at that internship, that part-time job. Maybe you've had a full-time job before. And see if there are ways that you can really talk about that impact, especially with numbers. We know you can't quantify everything, right? But think about things you might be able to quantify. So did you boost customer satisfaction ratings by 20%? Or maybe some of you have been a TA. How many students were in your class? Maybe you worked with children. How many children? What were their ages? Numbers like that really help the accomplishments jump off the page, and the employer can really see the impact of what you did. Also, really think about using field-specific language whenever possible, and that can really that's where doing an informational interview, like Caroline mentioned, can be so helpful because you could share your resume with the person you do the informational interview with, and they may be able to recommend some field-specific language that you could tweak slightly to really have it pop when you apply for positions in certain industries. And again, you want to think about having nice action verbs as well and not use the same ones over and over again. Responsible for, assisted. Try to make them pop more with really active action verbs like the ones you see on the screen. Present tense if you're still in that position, past tense if that position has ended. I did want to talk a little bit about the different design formats. Again, this can vary widely by industry. Caroline and I tend to work with students entering more creative industries, maybe marketing, advertising, communications. A lot of times we'll recommend the lightly designed resume you see in the middle. Some of our even more students targeting even more creative fields like graphic design may have a fully graphically designed resume like the Amanda example you see on the far right of the screen. The link at the top will take you to even more examples, including performing arts. There's a federal government example there. And then for many other industries, again, we've talked a little bit about the length, probably 1 to 2 pages for most. It may be more of kind of a standard black and white version like the one you see on the left. So again, very field specific. Definitely check out the examples. But regardless of what the resume looks like, I really want to take a moment to talk about ATS or applicant tracking systems. Piper talked about this a little bit in her section. So this is becoming something we really want to think about, especially if you're targeting private sector companies. ATS systems are becoming very, very common. I would say nonprofit, government, higher ed, for the most part, aren't using ATS much or at all yet. That could definitely change. But private sector in particular, you start to see a lot of ATS systems at play. So what that means is when you submit your resume through their website, there's going to be some sort of ATS filter that's looking for specific keywords. And if your keywords are not matching the ones they're looking for, a human being may not get to see your resume or your cover letter, and you're getting rejected by a computer, which is very frustrating. There's also not one specific ATS system, so we can't tell you do this and you're going to be fine. There are hundreds of ATS systems. So that's again where those informational interviews are really valuable because someone who works in that organization can tell you about, yes, we do use an ATS system. These are some things you want to think about. So really, the name of the game is keyword optimization. So you want to look at the job posting, especially the qualification section, look at the keywords that you see jumping out at you. For example, Microsoft Word. A lot of students say, of course I can use Microsoft Word. I'm finishing my master's degree. But you need to put it on there because that's likely a keyword that they're filtering for. And you need to say Microsoft Word if that's how they've said it and not MS Office because those would not match. You can also think about using both long form and acronyms to further your opportunities to match on those keywords. So you can see here user experience and UX, having those throughout your resume and or cover letter to make that match more likely. And we have, in the past kind of struggled with advice on whether to avoid tables and columns. Again, I think you can really talk to people in the organization to find out more about their specific ATS system. But I have in the past year or two seen these ATS systems become more sophisticated in what they can handle. For example, the Amanda example I showed you on the right of this slide is a real student who graduated last year, and she landed a full-time job at a big design firm that was using ATS systems, and she used this resume and she got through. And you can see it has all sorts of amazing columns and fonts and colors. So it's not a given that you can't have columns and design if you are entering a more creative field, but something to be aware of in case they are using an ATS system that is maybe not quite as sophisticated. Oops. Sorry. You go back here. So let's see. So in terms of some tools that can really help you with ATS systems, one is just looking at the keywords yourself. absolutely, you can do that. But other tools could be Terp AI. If you haven't heard, that's our version of ChatGPT here at UMD. You can put in your resume, the job posting, and a nice prompt. For example, what are some keywords I could add to this resume to better match the job posting? There are also tools you can check out, such as JobScan or Teal, Teal, that are free at the basic level, where you put in the resume, the job posting, and it will highlight the missing keywords for you and make suggestions. You have to pay if you want to do lots of uh, prompts with it, looking for keywords. But again, that is a way that maybe you can spend a little bit less time tailoring your resume. I will say as well, okay, thank you, Becca, for throwing Terp AI in the chat. I will say, if you are kind of targeting one industry in particular, you may not have to vastly tailor your resume every time. Again, it may be kind of really looking for the keywords, but you might not be changing sections each time if you are kind of sticking within a certain industry. Now, if you are targeting maybe multiple industries now, especially given the more challenging job market, you may have a couple different versions of your resume. But you need to get to the point where you can tailor this quickly enough to get enough applications out, but strike the balance of of tailoring it enough. And I think the tools like Terp AI, JobScan, Teal, hopefully that can shorten the time it takes you a bit to tailor your resume. As Caroline was saying before, we do have some really nice courses. For example, the Resume Basics module, if you want to go a little bit more in depth into resumes, that will walk you through a lot of the things I've covered today. And then we do have some templates linked up here that you could, if you're kind of starting more from scratch, maybe you're considering a new industry, you could use these as a starting point. And then in terms of cover letters, it is obviously also very important to tailor this. And I would always send a cover letter. That's a question we get a lot. Should I bother? I can hit quick apply and just send my resume. I would, if there's a chance, always send a cover letter because it's another chance to keyword optimize, and it's a chance to really tell your story about why you're interested in that specific organization and that specific position. So things to think about again, would be ideally addressing this to a person whenever possible. If there's a way you can look on their website, see a staff listing, and find the person that you would be reporting to, or maybe the person who's in charge of the office, ideally you can address it to that person. I know that's not always possible with some places you may be applying, in which case you may say something more like, "Dear hiring manager, dear search committee." But if there's a person, it's worth the time to address the letter to them. In the first paragraph, I think, let's see, maybe it was Caroline's section, where you can really talk about if you have a connection at that organization. Maybe you met someone at a career fair or a networking event. That's a great place to mention them there to make that personal connection. And then throughout the rest of the cover letter, you're going to use the keywords from the job posting and then give really clear examples of how you've demonstrated that skill they're looking for. So they are asking about teamwork. Use that word and then give an example of how you've demonstrated teamwork in a past job or internship or course. For the most part, this is going to be one page. You've got to be concise, to the point. And again, those tools I recommended before, I think, can further help you tailor your documents, get those keywords in there. So for the most part, you're going to have a 1 or 2 page resume, a 1 page cover letter, and we're not really going into it in this presentation, but you would also have a list of references. So typically 3 people who would be willing to get a phone call or an email on your behalf. Unless it specifically says recommendation letter, usually they just want more of a list of references, and usually they're going to ask for that in the interview process, but I'd go ahead and have it ready in case they ask for it earlier. These people are usually not going to be contacted until the interview process is proceeding on. You've had an interview, but it's good to think about who those references might be, ask them if they're willing to be a reference, and tell them that you'll keep them posted as you go throughout the process. All right, and kind of along those lines, this presentation, we've already talked at you for a long time, so we didn't want to lengthen this even further to talk about interviewing and salary negotiation. But ideally, you take, advantage of a lot of the tips we've mentioned today in terms of jumpstarting your job search, and that's going to yield an interview, right? So we wanted you to know there are a lot of resources available for when you get to that interview stage. A lot of great tips on our website that I have linked here. To mention TERP AI or ChatGPT again, I'm a big fan of using that to generate the possible questions you could get from an interview. Throw the job posting in there and say, what would be some good first round interview questions for this position? And it comes up with some really good ones. So you can practice that way. You can also conduct a mock interview using Big Interview. That's another one of those great tools that I think it was Becca was showing us earlier that are housed in Handshake under the Resources tab. And then we can also do live mock interviews in appointments as well. And then throughout the interview process or at the end of the interview process, we are always available to help you talk through job offers and salary negotiation as well. So again, those things come a little bit later in the process, but just know that we're here to help when you get there. This will link you to some college-specific resources. Again, you have, let's see, we're representing RQ, Info, and CMNS today, but there are lots of great colleagues and resources connected to our colleges as well as all of the others linked here. So I know that's been a lot of information. And again, we are not expecting you to take action on all of this today, especially as you probably have finals or projects or papers coming up in the next week. But to kind of wrap us up here, if you would be willing to maybe throw one of your next steps in the chat, we'd love to know kind of what you plan to do next. And at the same time as we do that, if you have any kind of final wrap-up questions, this would be a great time to throw those in the chat as well. Here. I see some great next steps here. So yeah, checking out all the tools. And again, this is not a one afternoon project. Check them out at a pace that works with everything else you've got on your plate at the moment. Taking a professional photo, yes, take advantage of our photo booth. We love it. Updating your resume. Yeah. And as I think that I put in the chat earlier, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. It really is a mix of applying for all those, great posted positions you see online and getting yourself out of your comfort zone to network. It is worth doing that. You'll really, I think, reduce your job search time if you're willing to do that. And I think I saw someone else here talked about joining the alumni group on LinkedIn. Yes. Highly recommend Terrapins Connect too. Yeah, the Terp family, not to be cheesy, everyone likes to help each other. There are a lot of great connections that can be made, even if your family doesn't work in the industry that you want to go into, activate the Terp family. Yeah. I'll let my colleagues jump in with any last parting words of wisdom.
I would just say we are all here as a part of your network as well. So if you're a little bit newer to LinkedIn or you're thinking about where you want to get started with some of that, we are friendly faces to connect with to start. So feel free to look us up as well, or reach out to any of us if you have more questions on this.
And I'll also highlight on that note, we are all available throughout the entire summer as well. So even though graduation and the semester ending is right around the corner, we'll still be available.
We've got a great question in the chat from Ruchika. Are there any major red flags you notice on LinkedIn profiles that students should avoid or fix before reaching out to recruiters or applying for jobs?
I don't know about like red flag as in like this is terrible, but I think one thing that comes to mind is people's headlines, right? So if you don't know what the headline is, right, it's that kind of first thing you see under someone's photo. Most people will often say like their job title. Um, but right, like students I'll see sometimes it just says like student at UMD, which, while true, um, is most of the time not doing you many favors. Right, it's a good opportunity for you to have a brief statement about your interest areas, your skills that you've had, right? Kind of if you're passionate about something, in terms of your career that you want to share. that's a good place to share a little bit of that and just kind of not be as simple as just saying student at UMT, right?
I would also just say this is something I learned the hard way, but when you make a LinkedIn profile, you put like your you can put your phone number and your personal email on there, or I'll sometimes see students share like their actual resume on LinkedIn. Just be mindful that there are scammers out there who will like be searching on LinkedIn to find that information and like may reach out with like fake offers or things like that, especially with the current market. So just be mindful of like where you're sharing your information. If you put your resume information, you may not need to put like your full home address and like phone number and email. Maybe you redact that part and say like send me a message or send me an email and you have a specific email for job seeking, just so that you don't end up in a situation where you're getting like scams or false offers from folks, which that can be kind of frustrating.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
gonna outside. Go
Oh,
ahead.
oh, go ahead. No, go
No, I was just
ahead.
gonna say, not having any photo or the photo has not been updated where it's still like a photo of you in your like drape from like high school graduation. Like those things are kind of like red flags for me.
Yeah, and to Kevin's point, we talked about keyword optimizing your resume and cover letter. Make sure you're doing it on LinkedIn too. And Caroline showed you the LinkedIn alumni sorting tool. I love using that to filter by what you're studying, or the field you're in, and then look at the top skills that are listed. So, if you're looking at people who've studied communication at Maryland in the DC area, entering the media and communication field, there's another column there that shows you their top skills, and make sure those are the types of skills you have listed on your LinkedIn profile, because there are a lot of recruiters that are out on LinkedIn as well, and they may be filtering by certain keywords, and that way you'll show up in their searches.
I see
All
another
right.
question here from McKenna. How can you or should you keep a connection with a company even if you get rejected from a position? McKenna, a few things I would say. One, I think thank yous after interviews go a long way. So I always try to like either ask the recruiter if, I would ask them like, can you send me the contact info for the folks who emailed me? I'd love to send a personal thank you, or could you pass this along to those folks? So, as you're interviewing, write down who's interviewing you. Um, I'll usually recommend also sending them a request on LinkedIn, like even after the interview process is over, even if you didn't get it, you might say something like, I really enjoyed meeting you. I'm still really grateful for the opportunity to learn more about what you did there. And like, I'd love to stay in touch. So trying to find those folks on LinkedIn as well. Continue interacting with them. So like if they post something, like congratulate them, kind of stay on their radar. And then the other thing I would say is, it's not uncommon to apply for roles again in the future. For example, I know people who applied 4 times before getting a job at Google, and they followed up with the recruiter when, they reapplied. And so it's also okay to keep an eye on jobs. And if you're applying for a certain type of role and it comes up again 6 months later, you may reapply, but then also email that recruiter that you worked with initially to say, I'm excited to submit my application again. Here are my updated materials. Even if you think, oh, well, they already rejected me once, you don't know where you were in that process before. It could be, and especially we're seeing it right now, the market has a lot of great candidates. And so it may be that they had too many before, but you'll make it in this time. So those are some things I'd recommend. I don't know if anyone has any others there. Okay.
And I added a response in terms of how long you have access to these resources. I mean, pretty much forever. Again, we continue to meet with you up to a year after graduation, and there is someone in the UCC who meets with alums more than 1 year out as well. So please continue to plug in and continue to come to career events as well. We'll have our big career fair in September. In the fall, we'll have a whole nother lineup of career programs. And someone mentioned, I think maybe Piper. There are events on Handshake with employers throughout the summer as well.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. It was really wonderful to have such an engaged audience. Have a great rest of your day and good luck with the search. We hope to see you again.